I want to thank everyone for skipping coverage of the RNC tonight to show up here. We're glad to have you here. It's hard to believe this time last week I was getting dragged through mud pits at camp, so I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I've still got bruises to show for that. So it really is great to have you here this evening. What I'd like to do is have a prayer together, and then we'll bring up James Russell, and James will share his spiritual story. James was just telling me beforehand that he loves public speaking. He is excited. He's really been looking forward to it. As a matter of fact, when we approached him to see if he would become a deacon, he said, "I'll do it only if you let me get up and share my story in front of people, a lot of people." So he needs more, matter of fact. So we might just be a good warm-up crowd for him. This might be too much space on the road. So we are excited for James to be here and share with us. And so as we begin, we're going to have a word of prayer. Is there anything in particular that you want mentioned or that we need to be aware of right now? Yes, ma'am. Okay, can you pray for Jared? Updates or anything? Just continue to go.
We had a PET today, but we don't know the results.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. And her name is her mom's or your friend? Hayden. Okay. Carrie. New York group. Yes. So far, we're unaware of any felony charges that have been pressed against the New York group. So, but they've only been there for a few hours, so it still could go very wrong. So, we'll continue that. They're all there safe. We need to continue to be mindful of Marion Campbell is his last name. And Marion's been really having some significant health issues, and so let's continue to pray for him. Let's go to the Father in prayer. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity we have to come together tonight. We are thankful for the chance just to simply look at each other and to smile and be in contact with each other. God, we're thankful for the deacons that serve this church, and we are thankful for the 5 new deacons that are chosen to join in this work. And God, tonight we're very thankful for James. We're thankful for Amber, and we're thankful for their kids. God, we're thankful for the way that they impact and touch our church and so many different lives in our church. And Father, I pray that you would be with James tonight, and as he speaks, I pray, Father, that we would all learn something even about our own faith journeys. God, we're mindful of the people that we request, we pray for Jared and the struggle against cancer. We pray, God, that you would continue to be with him. And the same thing for Carrie. And please be with her. Very kind of you. Father, we pray for Marion and bless him. God, we ask that you would also watch over the New York mission trip team. Be with them and help them to serve in your name and be a witness to you. God, I pray that there would be times that in their action that people would look and say, well, there's something different about these students. And I pray that they would point and shine a light and point to you. God, we thank you for the good time and the good things that happened at camp this last week. Lord, we pray that you continue to build on those things. And above all else, we thank you for Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
All right. So, I'm not a fan of public speaking. That's not obvious from Jordan's words. So, and those that know me probably find that to be surprising because I like to talk. But I'm gonna give you some information about me and my family and kind of my spiritual walk. And I actually wrestled with how to say this and what to say, and prayed a lot about what to share. And the more that I thought about this, the more I realized this is God's story of my life and not my story. And something that I find very apparent when I look back at events in my life is that God put me in different places than where I wanted to be because he knew better than I did. And I don't have any regrets about my life or about anything that's happened. But this is kind of hard to talk about, so I'll try to get through it. I was born in Lubbock, Texas, and shortly after that, my dad was in law school at the time. My mom and dad went to college there, so shortly after that, we moved to Roswell, New Mexico. So we were not flown there by spaceship. We got there in a car. I think I was too young. But I'm certain I didn't come on a spaceship. There's been no evidence found. So we moved to Roswell, New Mexico when I was about 2 years old and lived there for a couple of years. And then my father got a job in a place up north in Gainesville, Texas. And we moved up to Gainesville when I was about 4 years old and lived there for about almost 7-8 years. And in my perspective as a kid, Gainesville was the greatest place on earth. We went to the large Church of Christ there in town, as large as it was. I don't know how many members it was, but not as large as Crestview, but to me it was a big church as a little kid. And I loved it. I met my best friend there, my best childhood friend, and later would go on to go to college with that same kid. But he and I were very close. I was very involved with school, athletics, our church, and just loved every bit of life. And in my opinion, I lived in an ideal world with the all-American family. My father had a very good job. I had two siblings, a brother and a sister who are both younger that I loved very much, and had great friends, a great church, and just loved everything about it. And was raised in what I would consider to be somewhat of a conservative Church of Christ. So I was probably a little bit sheltered, but I thought the world was wonderful, and there were no problems. Nothing was ever wrong, and that our family was picture perfect. When I was 11 years old, one day my parents came home and found out my dad wasn't there, that he had been in a wreck, and a pretty bad wreck. And so I didn't actually think I could choked up talking about this. My father was in a wreck and found out, as time went on, that wreck actually resulted in a fatality of a driver in the other car. And other individual died in that wreck. And so, my parents kind of talked to me about this and said, the result of this is Dad's gonna have to go off, he's gonna have to go to jail for some time. He's been found guilty of incidental manslaughter, he's gonna have to go. Part of the details of that was that he sat down and said, look, I was drinking at the time that this happened. I had been at a concert in Dallas, was coming home, and I had been drinking, and I shouldn't have been. It's something that I should never do, and it shouldn't happen, but it did, and that was the result of it. And so I looked at that as a very unfortunate thing, but an isolated incident and something that, would kind of pass. Well, shortly, not too long after that, found out that my family, we were going to be moving, and we were going to leave Gainesville and move to Deming, New Mexico. And our family was pretty torn up about it and very sad. And as time went on, I started to realize, well, it's because Dad kind of lost his job throughout all of this, and some other things happened, and just needed to get away and move to a different place. And so we did, and we moved to Deming, New Mexico, and that was the first time that I really had my world rocked, and was very much just going from something that was a very happy place to something that I didn't know anything about, but it was extremely scary because I was leaving family, friends, everyone that I had grown to love, and going to a new place. And something that I was not looking forward to, and I just remember my whole family crying a whole lot, and that made me seem like everyone was really disappointed and upset about this. And so we moved to Deming and lived there, and if you've ever been there, it's about 29 miles, I think, north of the Mexican border. It's down in a little bitty part of New Mexico that's in the bottom panhandle point. But we drove forever in a U-Haul through what I thought was the wilderness and desert. So we eventually got there. But we moved to Deming, and it was a little bit of culture shock. I'd gone from a community that was very much, I felt like, white and black, to a community that was almost all immigrants. And I didn't speak the same language as a lot of the kids that went to school with me. I didn't know how to communicate with kids there, so I felt very much like an outsider. But grew to the point where I liked Deming a little bit, and about the time that I'd gotten settled and kind of comfortable with some friends and other people there, I just kind of noticed some things were a little bit off, and sensed something wasn't quite right with my dad, but didn't really know what. And one night, came home, my parents sat us down and talked to us and said, we're not gonna be together. We're moving apart. So, I didn't know how to take that. I grew up in a family, like I said, where I was very much in an ideal world, and especially, as a child in the Church of Christ, I didn't see that. And so I thought other people had issues that weren't part of the Church of Christ. I didn't realize that happened to people within it. So I had a hard time processing that. But that was when I was 13. And even at that time, I still had a lot of question marks. I didn't understand how much my father had struggled and kind of where he was at that time in his life. And so we moved, my mom's family lived in Roswell, New Mexico. So we moved back to Roswell to go and live there with her parents and my grandparents and be there. And it was a situation where I went about halfway through a school year and got there and got finished and thought, I want to go back where my dad is. In part because I wanted to go and live with my dad, and I really just wanted that relationship, but in part because I wanted to go back and play sports with my friends and be around the kids that I knew. And so I moved back, that was 7th grade. In 8th grade, I moved back to moved back to Deming to live with my father. And so it was just he and I. And in New Mexico, you can get your driver's license at age 15. Get your permit at age 14. It's not that way anymore, but it was when I was in 8th grade. And I was very old for my age. I was born in the beginning of September, so I got my driver's permit right as 8th grade started. And we were talking about this the other day. I know that scares all of you. We were talking about this the other day. I was not the kid who had hit puberty and was a giant child at that time. I was this big. I was a tiny little guy, but I had a driver's permit. So, I really look back at that and go, someone was really messed up in government at that age. But I did, and I lived with my father, and went through the first semester of that year, and I was very angry. I was angry and I was apathetic. I was a child that, as a kid, not trying to sound arrogant, but I had straight A's as a kid all the time. I loved school. I was very involved in it. 8th grade, I didn't care. I stopped getting good grades, stopped worrying about it, was angry and resentful to authority and coaches and teachers and other people, and just kind of had that attitude. And started getting that way when I was about 14 years old. And so in that and my father's relationship, the two of us just started to kind of, even though we were living together, just the two of us, we started to kind of split apart and separate. And with that, I think that caused even more problems for him than he already had. But I got to see firsthand, because he had let his guard down, with just me being there, the reality of what he was dealing with alcoholism and how difficult that was on him, and just really where he was in life. And so, I bring up the driving thing because that was one of the things that I remember very well, is that, in junior high, 8th grade, I would get up in the morning, and it was not unusual for my dad to wake up as I was, already ready for school, come in and say, hey, can you drive? And I would drive us to school, and it didn't occur to me until later on it was because he was impaired and couldn't drive. So I drove us to school, and then after that, he would go to his office or go home, and there were times where he wasn't home at night. There were different things that just kind of went on that I started to see more and more, and even though I was a little bit naive to all of it, I started to pick those things up and really understand what was going on. And so I got homesick and really wanted to go back and miss my mom in the first place, but missed my brother, missed my sister, and just missed having someone that was comfortable around me. And I'm so grateful for that, in spite of what I saw, because I think that has helped a significant amount down the road to understand what my dad went through, and for our relationship, and for me to not have issues with that now at this point in life. But all that to say, I say this because growing up in especially in the Church of Christ, but in the church period, you had this idea of what your preacher is and what your elders are and what everyone is, that everyone is fine and there are no issues and everybody's doing okay and there aren't any problems. And so when I saw my hero, the person that I looked up to and had the closest relationship with, was extremely broken, I lost faith in relationships. And that's where I realized that I started to kind of have a struggle with church and with God, and really had a hard time staying connected there and having a belief that God cared about me or that he loved me, because I didn't understand why he would allow that to happen in my family, or for that to be an issue with my dad, and why that is the case. And so I really struggled around that time, and moved back to Roswell, moved to a church that had a youth group that had other kids that were my age, whereas, I think Richard talked about that last week, and Brent talked about their churches with no one in Deming. I had that church. It was me at my age. I think there may have been one other kid in the youth group my age, but moving back to Roswell, there were other kids that were involved in church. So even though I was struggling there, I had some people around me that were good kids, that were examples that I could look to for some guidance, because I was missing that in a male figure. And fortunately, they had hired a youth minister at the time who had moved there right about the time that we had moved there in 7th grade. And so he took an interest in me too. And that was extremely valuable down the road for me. But at that time, all these kids were getting ready to go to this church camp at LCU called Encounter. I thought it sounded fun because we got to leave for a week and go stay in a college dorm, and thought, that's awesome. Go away from home, no parents, no supervision, stay in a dorm. This would be great at age 14. I went off to Encounter and got paired up with a bunch of kids who were just an older group of kids, and were exceptional models of what Christ and Christ's love is like. And through that week, I went through, at a time where I was really struggling to figure out who I was and where I belonged. found belonging with those kids and decided I'm gonna get baptized. You know, unlike Brent, I think, who said the water was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, I got baptized on Saturday, the last day of a church camp, when about 75 to 100 girls had been baptized during that week. So when I looked down in the water and saw makeup floating in the baptistry, I kind of second guessed whether or not that was the right decision. But fortunately, I went through with it, and I feel bad because my mom would have loved to have seen me be baptized, but I couldn't wait to get home to do that. I felt like that was something I needed badly in my life, and so my youth minister at the time was there and was very influential in that. We sat up all night talking, and so I was baptized. And I thought that being baptized would solve all the issues that I had and would make everything better, and that I would be good from that point going forward. That was definitely not the case. If anything, I got back home and went to high school and became more and more angry and struggled quite a bit in certain areas, especially with authority. And you know, in high school, I was looking for belonging somewhere and didn't find that with kids who were the right kind of kids. And so I spent a good chunk of high school hanging out with some kids who didn't go to church. You know, Roswell had a good youth group in the church that I was involved in, but the town itself was full of a lot of families that didn't go to church. And so I wondered why I was spending Sunday mornings and Sunday nights going, and so some of my friends got to the point where we'd have Sunday night youth group activities. We would show up at 5 minutes before it was over, walk in and go in so that we made a presence, and then go out with everybody afterwards. So we were involved, but we weren't actually involved. And that just became a habit for me to not really care about church and to still feel agreed with God in my life and really have a connection. And you know, I got to the point where I didn't enjoy being in Roswell, and I remember Gainesville as being this perfect place. And my best friend that I grew up with also played basketball, and so we were talking about where we were going to go to college, and we were on the phone the summer before my senior year, and this is kind of where I started seeing God's hand in my life a lot more than and an understanding of what He was doing and redirecting my path. But at that time, I wanted to go back to Gainesville, and so I got off the phone. Kevin had talked to his mom. We had talked about this, and we had planned it all out that I was going to move there, live with him, have a great senior year, go off to college, go play basketball. It was going to be wonderful. I went and talked to my mom about this, and fortunately she was wise and also had been without me for a year and knew how rough that was, and she wasn't going to let it happen again. So she told me no, which made me angry. And so I became even more of a problem to myself my senior year, and just basically became rebellious. And spent a good chunk of that senior year just biding my time to get out of town and get away. And so basketball didn't go well. You know, didn't get along with my coach. Things went south. Ended up getting to the end of the year and not really knowing where I was going to go to college. And knew that had I been in Gainesville, I would have already had my scholarship. Everything would have been figured out. Would have been just fine. But since I was in Roswell and stuck out in the middle of nowhere, I didn't know what I was doing. And happened to just end up on the phone with this same friend who lived in Gainesville, and we were talking about it. And I had just gotten back from going to a visit to another school and looking at it, and a coach had sat me down and said, "Look, you don't belong here. You don't belong in a junior college. You need to go to a four-year school. I hate to break this to you, but you're this tall, you're this slow, and you're not going to play in the NBA." And I thought he was an idiot, but I left, and some of that actually sunk in. And at the same time that this friend called me up and said, "Hey, we're going out to visit ACU. It's halfway between Gainesville and Roswell, just about. Why don't y'all come out and meet? We can go take a visit together, and that'll be a chance to go hang out and see each other. Our moms were great friends. It'd be good for us to all get together and go do that. So we did. And the week before we had scheduled, or the week before we went out, we had already scheduled when we were going. That same coach that sat me down called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, have you figured out where you're going yet?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I just took the head job at Abilene Christian University. Is there any chance that you would be willing to come here?" And I said, "Actually, I'm coming out to visit next week. I got a scheduled visit. You know, can I come sit down with you and talk?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd love to have you come out here. We'll go through all this." You know, so in my mind, everything had gone wrong in where I was supposed to be, where I was supposed to be playing, what was supposed to be happening, and God started lining things up because I wasn't listening and I wasn't paying attention. And He ended up directing me, in my opinion, to Abilene Christian. And I went to school there. You know, the first few years of school, I had basketball going on. Was pretty much busy. Got done with some of that and was still angry. So the coach and I didn't get along very well. I rubbed him the wrong way and I stopped playing basketball. And got to a point where, again, that anger and apathy started expressing itself and going out. So I got to a point my junior year where I had just started playing a lot of golf to get away from school and get away from things. And I know that this has kind of got a sports theme to it, but I'm slightly hard-headed, and that was what I knew, and that was where I was comfortable. Fortunately, that's where God would speak to me because I wasn't looking for Him or seeking Him anywhere else. And there was a tournament that I went back to in Deming every year while I was in college to go play and go visit my father. And at that point in our relationship, it had gotten to the point where I think he felt so guilty and so ashamed of all the things that he had done that he just quit contacting us and quit reaching out to us. And so I felt like I was an adult in the relationship, even though I was extremely immature. And so I was angry with him. But I would go out for that connection every year for that golf tournament to go visit him, stay with him, and hope that maybe things would get better. And the summer after my junior year, I went out there to go play in this golf tournament. And the previous year, he and I had gotten into a gigantic fight on the golf course because I was not playing well. And so I projected my anger onto him because I was angry with him. And you know, got in his face, got into a huge fight in front of my brother, which I think probably scared the living tar out of him. But it was one of those things that had happened, and you know, that was what I had in my cross still. Whenever I went back this next year for that golf tournament, was, are we going to get along? How's this going to go? And I had done fairly well and got to the last day of the tournament and just imploded and started playing very poorly, and got to a point where I had just broken down about as far as I could go. And actually just, he was terrified because he thought I was going to blow up and go after him again. And so he didn't say anything. And after about 2 holes of just struggling, I kind of walked off on my own and just felt the need to pray. And walked over and just asked God that, you know, if you can help me out with this and come to me here and make me play well enough to get through the day without fighting with my father, you know, maybe you're still around. And I don't know why, outside of the fact that I feel like he reached for me at that moment. But from that point on, I played the best I've ever played in my life to this day. And ended up winning the tournament. And just realized that for the first time in a long time, that he was there. And that he still loved me and that he wanted me to be with him in some way. And excuse me. Through that, I kind of went back home, and at that point, just kind of realized that I was messing up in a lot of areas, and started praying to him and said, look, I'm sorry. you know, I made a lot of mistakes, but I need you to put people around me. I need you to put someone in my life to help me out. And within about 30 days of that time, a friend of mine said, hey, I know that you said you don't think there's any girls left at ACU that are worth any interest at all, but you might want to come meet my girlfriend's roommate and come sit with her and talk to her a little bit. And y'all may be the two pickiest people I know, so y'all may be. So I walked into the campus center one day and met Amber, and she was a little sassy and was not afraid to kind of get in my face and humble me a little bit, which was definitely needed, and I was hooked. And you know, at that point, I was just at a place where I needed that more than just about anything else. And fortunately, we became inseparable and decided to get married. And about the time that I had asked her to marry me, I started thinking, she needs to know how messed up I am. And I need to talk to her about all of these things. And so, you know, one night I just kind of went and was terrified, far more than I am tonight, to sit here and talk. Because, you know, the last time that I had someone take off and leave, you know, it ruined a relationship. And so I didn't want that to happen, but I knew that she had to know about my guilt and my struggles with things, and I had to lay that out because I wasn't at the point where I felt comfortable talking to Jesus about that. And I did, and in spite of the fact that I expected her to start up her truck and take off, you know, she loved me more. And I saw that and saw the example of what God is for us and how He loves us in spite of everything that we've done. He loves us more and wants us to be with Him. And I saw that in you every day. You know, fortunately, she stuck with me for 15 years now. So we came here, and obviously most of you, or a lot of you, know that her entire family is here. In fact, that's half of this room, I think. But the majority of her family is here at Crestview, and I came here and still just, this isn't my home. I didn't know anyone. I felt a little bit lost. And every Sunday that I was here, there was one guy that kind of found his way over to come and talk to me and make his way over and say hi. I really have no clue why. But Jim Martin just took an interest in me. And ever got choked up talking about Jim? But you know, I worked in the golf industry, and so I was here maybe once every 2 months because Sunday's one of the busiest days, so I didn't get to make it here. But every Sunday that I was here, Jim found his way over and came and talked to me, and I thought, why is the preacher talking to me? He's got all these people that are here all the time, and he should probably take care of. I'm hardly ever here. He probably doesn't know who I am. And we developed a friendship, and he became a mentor for me. And you know, I've been very fortunate that between he and Amber and my old youth minister and others, that I've had some people that God kind of placed in my life at different times that helped direct me in a place where I end up here. And you know, I jokingly told Mark Driscoll whenever they called and asked me if I would serve, you don't really know what you're getting into, do you? But the truth is that, you know, I talk about all of this because you know, I grew up in an environment in the church where people didn't talk about things, and they don't talk about how broken and flawed things are, and they'll talk about how much struggle that they had. And so I know that God gave me this life to share with other people. And that's one of the things that I take to heart. So, you know, you want to know things about me and what I'm passionate about, or kind of my spiritual walk. I take a very big interest in people who have come from broken homes and have a passion for talking to people and helping people that have that background. You know, few things I'll mention just kind of about different people in my life that I've talked about. My dad was a great man, and in spite of all the struggles that he had and the difficulties we had in our relationship, one thing that he taught me when my parents were divorced and I went to go visit him, we went to 2 or 3 different churches because, again, he was at the Church of Christ and kind of left that after my parents got divorced, and it was a very small church, and so he went to a couple of other churches that had instruments, and I walked into the building and felt like I was supposed to turn around and walk out. Didn't know how to handle that. But one thing that my dad taught me that stuck with me forever, I remember asking him questions about just that issue and others, and him telling me, look, God doesn't care about anything except for your heart. And everyone may not agree with me on some things, but one thing that I know and firmly believe is that God wants our heart, and He wants us to believe in Him and to love Him and to be in a relationship with Him. And because of that, I firmly am thankful for Him teaching me that lesson at a young age. One of the things that my parents did whenever I was younger too is we lived in a town, like I said, it was about half white, half black, and there was a church across town that there were not any white people in there, but we went once every 2 or 3 months and went over there just to go worship, and my dad would talk to everyone. And I remembered seeing that and thinking, it's important to understand that there are no differences between anyone in the eyes of God, and that stuck with me to this day, and that's something that I want to pass down to my kids, and I want them to understand the importance of loving everyone. My mom showed me throughout all of that time, all of those difficulties. She went and had us as a single mom working, had us at church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. All the appointed hours we were and the honest truth of that is even though I didn't want to be there, that was an unbelievable example for us. And she persevered in spite of all the difficult circumstances. And I remember seeing her with a Bible. I remember seeing her at study. I knew she went to women's studies. I knew she did all kinds of things that whether I talked about it with her whenever I was a kid or not, I saw those things. And so I'm extremely grateful for the example that she set for me and my brother and sister. God let me know, in my opinion, He came to me through sports because, like I said, I was stubborn and hard-headed, and I wouldn't necessarily seek Him other ways. But He gave me hope by bringing Amber into my life. And in all honesty, even when we got married, I struggled spiritually, and still do. But she is the path to my spiritual career. She makes me want to be a better person, and I know that God giving me that gift puts me in a place where I owe Him, and whether that's the way I should feel or not, I do. And that makes me want to be a better person every day. One thing that I'm fortunate enough to do is sit with a bunch of other guys that are part of this church or with friends who have made me feel very comfortable with the struggles that I have, and I've been fortunate enough to get to hear from them about things that they struggle with and how difficult marriage is, how difficult parenting is, how difficult it is to be a man who leads and is part of this world and is different from what we see every day everywhere else outside of the church. And I'm very grateful for Crestview and for those people who I've gotten to know and gotten to be involved with. And I'll say one more thing. John 1 is kind of something that I've clung to for a long time, specifically verses 17 and 18. And the reason for that is that speaks of God's grace. And I didn't grow up understanding what grace was. I didn't realize that that I had that, and I'm very grateful for Jim and for this church and for kind of what I've seen in the leadership and individuals of this church modeled for me, and I'm very appreciative. So that's the extent of what I'm going to say.
Thank you so much, James. Thanks for blessing us with that. I want to just invite the elders that are here. I think 3. Are there 4? Where's our 4? Is our
Oh, there-
Okay. Well, you guys come up and surround James and Amber and maybe Bill. Would you mind saying a prayer? Oh, there's one. Would you mind saying a prayer over?
For those of you who know me well and know how easily I get choked up, think nothing of my vibrating voice when I'm praying. Dear God in heaven, on this really hot Texas day that you blessed us with, we're so thankful in this corner of Crestview that we're here tonight, and that you provided your servant James to really bless us all in ways we just didn't see coming. And I just pray that every heart that's heard this wonderful story of reality and the way you've moved in his life, that it impacts all of us in the most positive of ways. But we all know that we're all part of families that are broken too. Some more than others. But we know that reality. Whether it's personal, in the lives of our favorite cousin, wherever it lands. And we just want to pray that your continued blessings will fall all over in abundance to James and Amber and the family and the entire half of this room that is his extended family. And that he will continue to seek you, and that you will just make it abundantly clear how you're blessing him and helping him mature to be the leader he is, and the leader he will continue to be and grow to even more. In whatever ways we can encourage him, please not only allow us to do it, but provide a path that we can see our limit and out of wisdom to do that, to bless him and Amber and his family. We thank you for all of our deacons and for all the servants' hearts that they have. I thank you for all the people, the majority of Crestview, hopefully all of Crestview, that has the heart of the servant. And may we continue at Crestview, as Emily Christian has told us before when she's out and about, continue to be known as the church that helps people. May nights like this encourage us all to trust in you and help each other more. Just thank you for James and being with him and helping him to get all this out tonight in such a way that was so powerful and so encouraging and so good. So as we're counting our blessings now, would you just help us all to continue to trust in you each and every day. Thank you for loving us. And as I close this prayer, would you be with my cousin Johnny Fulbright in Levelland, Texas, that I omitted a while ago, as he fights for his life with 2 or 3 months, according to the doctors. That's all that's left. And just bless that whole entire family. And let's all end this prayer together now. In the name of Jesus, by saying, Amen.
Yeah.
You roll in.
I failed to say this because we're pretty much out of time, but I've actually had this question from a lot of people, and maybe I can answer it for Robbie and David and actually do it justice. But a lot of people have asked what we do and what our company is. We actually provide medical supplies and equipment for children with special needs. And that's a big part of our story. I didn't get into any of that because I'm wasting all of your time anyway. But I just wanted to answer that so that now no one has to ask that question.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you very much for sharing. I know that we just want to just surround you and thank you for opening up like you have. What a great night to be together. Really appreciate you being here. Do remember Steve Williams also in your prayers. He had knee replacement surgery yesterday and he's doing well, but it's a nice, long, good recovery. So God bless you, and we'll see you back at the next
handsome.
I'm just behind the wheel going forward.
As department head, I get beside me. Right now, my main objectives are basically just